So, our next presenter is Jennifer Walden. Now, I'll talk a little bit about her. She's a writer and a yoga instructor and has found healing and connection to self, following the pen as it dips and dives across the page. Jennifer has facilitated local working circles, encouraging participants to play with their words, their stories, and connect to themselves by listening to their hearts. As a certified yoga instructor, teaching expressions, which is a restorative yoga class that blending movement, breath, and creative writing. Jennifer will be sharing her story of coming to and running from the page, the mat, life, and her sometimes maddening obtuse search for connection, which she occasionally remembers is always right here waiting. Please put your hands together for her soul talk is called Meeting Yourself on the Page. Please welcome Jennifer Walden.
Hello, everyone. My heart is so excited to be here. Ever since I accepted the invitation to speak today, it's been humming a little tune. It has a little disco beat with some Latin undertones, so I know that it's fun. But on the downbeat, it keeps saying connection, connection, connection. My mind, on the other hand, has been freaking out. And it wildly flips back and forth between delusions of grandeur, that this talk is going to change the world. It's going to bring about world peace and end all suffering in the world. And there's no pressure on that, though. But then that's often immediately followed by dire fantasies of failure, that everything's going to go wrong, and that often stops people from taking the step to connect. I haven't always recognized that I have two distinct voices, the mind and the heart. And if I was to write my autobiography right now about the first 40 years, it would probably be called The Reluctant Life, because I'm always so stuck between that perfectionism and that fear of failure that it kind of has kept me reluctant. But practicing writing, the practice of writing, has really helped me recognize the story and identify who the narrator is, both externally and internally. So I'm able to see it when people are talking to me. I'm able to see it when I'm creating stories about the world around me and my own life. And oddly, it's actually helped me loosen my grip on stories in general. And one of the most common things people say to me when they hear that I write is that they could never do that. They always say that they don't have enough creativity or, I don't know, the imagination to come up with the stories. And while I agree that they might not put pen to paper, we are all storytellers. We tell stories all the time. We are constantly creating characters and events and plots around us, both externally and internally, creating the story of what we think our life has been and is and what our personal identity is. And we play roles of either supporting or lead roles in the sagas that people are creating around us. But I believe that story in its truest form creates shared beliefs that connect cultures and communities together. And they also create how we see our own personal identity. And that they're skillful stories. And the skillful stories bring us deeper into our hearts. And they make us understand more about what life is in the capital T form of truth. And in an odd paradox, they're necessary in order to release their necessity. Where unskillful stories lead us further away from ourselves. They distract us. And oddly enough, we tend to cling to the story more than the lesson sometimes with those unskillful ones. And right now in the world, there are so many sources of incoming stories. We're like deafened by the barrage of them, which is unfortunate because in order to hear our heart story, or our heart speaking to us, we actually have to get quiet to hear it and have intention to listen to it. So my favorite way of creating that connection within myself has been free writing. And free writing is probably most popular through Julia Cameron's Artist's Way with morning pages. She wasn't the first, and she's definitely not the last that suggested this practice. But my favorite way to free write is with a neutral prompt. So you start with like the black hat or lemons or hammer. And you just start writing as fast as you can in what people call outwriting your editor. And what I've come to think of as outpacing my thinking mind and dropping into my heart. This process really takes me out of my looping thoughts and the narrative that I have going on all of the time. And it gives me a new door to walk through. So I can look at things with a different perspective, create a new story, or create the story differently. Or sometimes even just get that story completely gone. Like, it disappears. There's a literary style that I love that's called impaired perception story. And in an impaired perception story, the writer actually tells two stories. One as told by the narrator, so reality is explained through the narrator's view, and the other one through a character who doesn't see reality the same way the narrator does. And the character reacts to the story elements as if they're following a completely different storyline. I have lived that life a lot. And one of the things that I thought like most identified it was in my late 20s, I went through a very dramatic divorce that took a very long time. And during that process, people would say to me, "Oh, you must be so angry." And I remember wondering why everyone was saying that to me because I didn't feel angry at all. Yet at the same time, I developed a love for what Bernie Mac called angry rap. And I loved that hard, insistent beat. It just resonated with me. And now in hindsight, I'm willing to admit that that might have been anger. But more than the music, I loved the lyrics and the stories. And it's not that I could identify with the gangster lifestyle that was being depicted in the songs, but I knew the frustration. I knew the betrayal, both personal and systemic. And I felt anger even if I couldn't identify it at then. And at the same time, I also accidentally got involved in Krav Maga. And Krav Maga is an Israeli military form of dirty street fighting. So I had enrolled my kindergarten-age son up in karate, which he loved. So I made a rookie move and signed him up for a whole year. And then he didn't love it anymore. And my only option was to bring the contract over to myself. And the only adult classes they offered was Krav Maga. So that's when a 30-year-old me learned to throw her first punch and fall in love with sparring night. Seriously, I liked it way too much. And so if we take that back to impaired perception, you know, if you have a story with a character who loves rap and is a sparring fiend, then you go, oh, there's an angry woman right there. But if you have a character that doesn't realize she's angry and is doing those things, you have some room for some comedy or some tragedy to come enter in there. And there's a Buddhist style of meditation called Tonglen. And I'm going to simplify it for time's sake. But in that one, you identify a feeling, like a feeling of isolation or betrayal or shame. And you breathe that feeling in while you're imagining all the other people in the world that feel that same feeling. And then you breathe out love and compassion. And Pema Chodron is an instructor of that form of meditation. And she says, without fail, every single workshop she teaches, somebody comes up and says, it's a beautiful practice, but no one else feels the way that I feel. And her answer is always impossible. And so I always think of my rap time as like an unconscious practice of Tonglen because I liked feeling that connection. And it wasn't because misery loves company, but because there's something so isolated in feeling that you're all alone in your feelings, especially feelings of pain. And that's what story is to me. It's connection. Whether it's talking with friends or participating in a workshop, reading a contemporary writer, or reaching back hundreds of years and reading a writer and going, wow, even then, I'm not alone. And so I find that there's courage and comfort and solidarity built into the sharing of voice and experience when the sharing comes from the heart. And there's a popular collective story right now. And if you're a believer in this story, I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not asking you to change your mind, but I'm asking you to bring impaired perception and Tonglen into it and look at it from a different perspective. And the story is that we live in an unprecedented time. And I just ask, is that story skillful? And if you take it to Tonglen, is it even possible that we feel differently than people before us have felt? And as the collective, is it skillful for us to turn our back on the wisdom of our ancestors and their existence and their experience and the stories that they've tried to preserve and pass forward to teach us and to make us feel not alone? As we isolate ourselves through story. So, just a question. What does that collective idea of unprecedented time do for us? And I'm going to ask you to participate in an exercise of impaired perception, doing something that we do every day, breathe. And in our culture, when we think of our breath, we tend to think of exaggerating the inhale. We're always talking about taking in a big, deep breath and then letting it go on the exhale. In reality, from a physiological perspective, we have so much more control of our exhale. Physiologically, our abdominal muscles contract and expel the air, where the air comes rushing in because the atmospheric pressure comes in to fill the space that we've created. So I'm going to ask you guys to stand up. And this exercise is going to involve touch. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can either move to the side of the room or the back of the room. If you're comfortable with it, come on together across the aisle. You're going to be putting your left hand on the back of the person to your left and your right hand over your heart. As we do this exercise, we're going to focus on the exhale first. If you're on this side of the room over here, just hold your left hand up. Yeah, left hand up. And imagine yourself holding the back, the universal back. And if you're on this side over here, just hold your right hand up and imagine that the universal back or hand already has your back. And now we're going to focus on the exhale. And as we're focusing on the exhale, I want you to think of all the power that you have to expel that and create space within yourself. And when we do the inhale, I want you to just think about how easy inspiration is when you just allow it to come. So I want you to take the exhale and just whoosh out through your mouth. And then just be in allowance and let the air fill up your lungs. Feel it fill into the hand that's on your back. And then exhale. Inhale. Feel that connection that the breath gives you and the people around you. Inhale. And this is the last one. We're going to let the air just fill our lungs. And then we're going to do a really exaggerated, powerful exhale. Okay, now you can drop your hands and kind of shake them around.
Okay, we have a comment here from the back of the room. I feel like Phil Donahue.
I sort of forgot about the impaired perception part about it after the fact, but what struck me was the feeling of those interwoven hearts while we were breathing. I loved that we were all breathing together and connected, and that just felt really good.
Well, let's thank Jennifer Walden.
Thank you, everyone.
The thing that always trips me out about this process is that whenever I do one of these, the end shows up in the beginning. I had no idea where Jennifer was going with this, and I had no idea the breath thing was part of her talk. And so what showed up was this page that this person is just kind of pouring herself into and is also sort of emerging out of at the same time, and this pen that is kind of writing her. She's writing the story, or is the story writing her? And then this breath thing happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what all this stuff, this big exhale, this blue, this beautiful blue just streaming out in this wonderful exhale. And I was astounded. Does anyone know what this is down here? That's her anger. She has transcended the anger. And like all the elements, the fire allows the air to rise. So that was beautiful. Thank you.